Hi everybody, and welcome back to my Wargames hobby channel. As you know, over the last few weeks I've been learning to play the new Muskets and Tomahawks rules, the new version 2, and I've placed on YouTube 7 videos now from 2 games covering the learning curve I've had on learning the rules. And I'm just about to start a 3rd game in actual fact, but before I did that I thought I would showcase the army I've been using. In fact, this isn't just for Muskets and Tomahawks. About 18 months ago, a group of friends at my club, Farnborough Wargames Club, decided to get into this period, and we were using sharp practice quite a bit for skirmishes, so we decided we would paint up a force for that. Also, I use Rebels and Patriots, which are a very simple set of rules, but I quite enjoy them. And then further on from that, we decided we would do bigger battles using the Black Powder rules and the American War of Independence supplement. So I've built up quite a big force, so I thought I would show you that now, just out of interest really. Being a bit of a historian, I do like to, when I do an army, base it on fact. So you'll notice, you know, when I talk through the army list with you, I'll give a bit of information about the regiments and the type of units used in that war, just out of interest really. So here we go, here's the American force I have. We'll just zoom in down a little bit closer, and from left to right I'll go through what I've got. The units I'm using are all from Pennsylvania. I decided I'd stick to one state, and all these units were at Valley Forge in the winter of 77 and 78. And as you can see, they're quite a variety of uniforms. They're all Pennsylvania units we've just seen. Further back we've got some riflemen there with long rifles, Minutemen or militia, and further militia just armed with muskets. They can actually fight on either side. The British side, they had loyalists fight for the British, and obviously the Rebs had a lot as well. And then finally some artillery, some officers, and then some cavalry at the back there, the 3rd Light Dragoons. It's actually quite interesting. I never realised when I started researching the painting of these figures, I didn't realise the variety of colours that were available. This is a very good painting guide in the Perry box of plastics that I used, which I would highly recommend. I think they're absolutely brilliant. It just shows you how many different colours there were there used. You tend to think of the American War of Independence being blue uniforms with white or red facings. But in fact, initially, there were a lot of brown uniforms, as you can see, and even some red ones. There we are. This is what you expect to see when you think of the American War of Independence. The blue uniforms, as featured here. These ones have got red facings, but that's what you expect. But in fact, that's not the case. There we are. There's the guy on the left that you would expect to see a uniform. But in fact, early on in the war, there were a lot of brown uniforms. And as you can see, I've done the first 5 regiments from left to right from the Pennsylvania state. So of the 5 I've done so far, 3 are brown and 2 are blue with various facings. There's my first regiment. That's the 1st Pennsylvania. The brown uniform with the green facings. And that's what they look like in real life. And then the 2nd regiment is the blue uniform with the red facings. And then moving on to the 3rd regiment, which is again back to a brown uniform, this time with white facings. There we are, that's what they look like. Then the 4th regiment is blue with white facings. That's the biggest regiment I did. And finally, in fact, that is the light infantry from the 4th regiment supposedly were dressed in green, and that's quite common. Yes, some regiments had mixed uniforms. There just wasn't enough cloth sometimes of one colour to go round. So often the lights were dressed differently, but not always, of course. Then we have the 5th Regiment, which again are brown uniform, this time with red facings. Now you'll also notice that a lot of figures wear this, what they call hunting shirts. And they were very popular in North America at the time. You can see from this other painting guide to the right there's a lot of different coloured hunting shirts that were being worn by units. Some of the units wore hunting shirts and some of them wore the normal uniform, so it was quite a mixture, and mixing those in for regiments is fine. That's how they used to be supplied. Now the unit there, I'm featuring a unit of either militia or Minutemen armed with the long rifles. Then we have a unit of militia, or they could be Minutemen. Minutemen got their name, of course, from the fact that early on in the war they could raise a local force of militia within a minute. That's what they said anyway. Then we've got a couple of generals there. You can see the uniform was blue with buff facings. And then finally the American 3rd Light Dragoons. Cavalry wasn't used a great deal in the war, only light cavalry, no heavy cavalry. And there's the uniform of the 3rd Light Dragoons. So that's my American part of the army. As you can see, it's far too many for a skirmish. They say I use them for black powder in the numbers that are showing now. But for the skirmish I use anything from a couple of dozen to sort of 30 or 40 men. Now we're going to move on to the British. I started the British first, in fact, before the Americans. And they've also got, in a minute, you'll see some allies. But here we are. Let's look at the British first. Now I've done 3 regiments. The 1st regiment there are of white facings. And you'll notice the flag, which should be that, the Union Jack should be like it's shown here, not the current Union Jack. So it should have been this one, without the Irish satire of red. Then we have a unit with buff facings, followed by a unit with blue facings. And then, of course, some British Grenadiers, also with blue facings. Then you can see the front skirmish unit are Butler's Rangers, and to the right they've got some Indian allies that they often used to fight with. And behind them 2 light infantry skirmish units. And behind them a couple of officers and some British 17th Light Dragoons. And finally we move over to the far left with some mercenaries from the state of Brunswick in Germany. I've decided to go to Brunswickers rather than Hessians, which are often used by many wargame armies, but I decided to stick to Brunswickers. They're a bit more unusual. So let's look at each regiment individually. The British, as you know, had facing colours of various colours. I've done white, beige and blue. I could have done yellow as well, and green. There's various colours, but I just stuck to the 3 colours. And you can choose any regiment you want. There are plenty of regiments faced with white, plenty of blue regiments. They're usually royal regiments. And the same with buff. I can think of one. The obvious one is the Royal West Kents Regiment, the Buffs. So that's why I decided to do 3 different facing colours, and I can choose whichever regiment I want to use. And finally the British Grenadiers, again with blue facings. And then we move on to Butler's Rangers, flanked by some Indians. They often used to fight with Indians. And also you can see on that photograph that the uniform in fact was issued was green with red facings, but many of their troops wore green hunting shirts. Next we see the 2 officers, and then behind them we have the 17th Light Dragoons. In there, it's not how you think of the 17th Light Dragoon. They were, of course, eventually to be called the 17th Lancers, but here they are in their bright red, smart-looking uniform. Next we have an artillery piece We don't use much artillery in skirmishes, to be honest, and even in black powder we don't use many because there weren't that many artillery pieces used in the war, certainly in battles. They were more used in sieges. And finally, we have a look at the Allies. We hired a lot of mercenaries in the American War of Independence from the various German states. Often you see Hessians being used. I decided to stick to the Brunswick contingents that were sent over. And, you know, it really doesn't matter which ones you use. The uniforms were very, very similar. But I just stuck to Brunswicks because no one else has done them really before. And there's a good sort of, that's some Brunswickers with white facings. Each regiment varied slightly. You can see some of them have got different sort of headgear, Grenadier headgear. And that's the normal sort of like they're like British except with blue uniforms rather than red. And of course a very interesting unit of Brunswick Dragoons. They were the only cavalry to be sent from Germany to be hired as mercenaries during the war, and due to the high cost of transporting horses and saddlery over the Atlantic, they didn't actually take any. They hoped to get it while they were in America, which they failed to do, which was a bit unfortunate, so they ended up fighting on foot. There is a rumour that they did fight in their long boots, but there's also a chance that they used these. You can see in another picture in a minute. Here we go. Here's the picture now. The blue striped trousers. The figures I've got the boots, so I've left them like that. They also used to use. They didn't use a musket. They used their carbine. And they were a very well trained unit indeed. Unfortunately, they only took part in one battle. That was the Battle of Bennington. And unfortunately, they came off for far worse in that battle. A lot of them were killed and the rest were captured. So they didn't really do well in America at all. So that's it. They're the two sides that I have for this period. As I say, mainly I'm using them for the new rules, muskets and tomahawks. But I use them for black powder and any other rules really. It's just a nice period to have got into after all these years. I'm not a brilliant painter, I have to admit. I'm a war gamer that wants to get troops ready to put on the table. I'll make a reasonable job of them, what I call to an acceptable war game standard. But we've got some people at the club that can paint really fantastically well, and however much I try, I can't match them. And I haven't got the time anyway. I just paint to get the troops on the table in a reasonable condition, and I think I do all right. They're not bad at all. Don't look too close, mind you. I probably zoomed in a bit too close on some of them. So that's it for me, guys. I just thought I'd show you what I use, and I'll do another video soon. The next battle's ready to go. And in the meantime, keep fit, keep well, stay indoors, and I'll see you again soon.